welcome back to my channel. I'm here with my mom today, who some of you may remember from a previous interview that we did together earlier this year. My mom has mental illness herself, and she's here today to share her story with us. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Lee. I'm Carolyn's mother. Yeah. And we're here in my hometown and Carolyn's hometown of Barrington, Illinois, because she's here visiting us.
Yes. And we get to bond, and we get to
Yes.
spend quality time together.
And we have.
It's been
Yeah.
great. All right, well, moving forward, I would just like to throw out a disclaimer on this video to say that neither of us are mental health care professionals.
True.
We are in no way qualified to offer any medical advice, or really any advice for that matter. We're just two people with lived experience having mental illness who are here to share our journeys, what we've learned along the way, and our experiences. I'd also like to throw out a trigger warning to say that we will be talking about mental illness in general, and there may be some themes that might be upsetting to certain people. So if at any time you feel uncomfortable during the video, you're more than welcome to leave. Anyway, Mom!
Yes.
So we have a bit of a bond. We have some generational stuff going on.
Yes.
How far back do you think mental illness goes in our family?
It's hard to know for sure, but I want to say I can track it through my dad, my grandfather. And this is on the Potter side, my dad's side. And I would not be surprised if it went further back than that, because it sounds like they were all a bunch of rapscallions who didn't have a lot of control over themselves sometimes.
Right. And we're well familiar with that because we both have bipolar.
Right.
So I have schizoaffective disorder bipolar type. I'm kind of half bipolar. And Mom, you are full-blown bipolar.
Yep. Bipolar 2, which, if you don't know the difference, bipolar 1 is primarily manic focused bipolar, and then bipolar 2, which I have, is more depressive significant. And I definitely, I can look back at my life and say, oh yeah, that was totally the way my life formed. You know, it was as a young person feeling very awkward and kind of off to the side, kind of watching people and feeling that lowness that comes from not connecting with people in a really permanent or fundamentally positive sort of way. Also, one of the things that I discovered later, which I can talk about later, is that I also turned out to be a highly sensitive person, which definitely affected how the bipolar expressed itself in my life.
Yes.
Yeah.
You are like one of those people whose emotions are exposed nerves. You feel everything very, very deeply.
Yeah.
You've always been very passionate, I would say, in that way, because like you are so expressive, even with it under control. You've always been like very creative, very, like, I would say, you've been outgoing, but you've also had your times where you've kind of withdrawn. And looking back over my childhood, I think I can kind of pinpoint times. Can you pinpoint maybe like the beginning signs, and how early can you like kind of think back on it?
Well, I don't remember it so clearly during my like grade school years, or even to a certain degree my middle school years. That time was largely about not quite being able to figure out how to fit in. And as I told my therapist recently, like, the interesting thing was people didn't bully me. I was not one of those kids that people looked at and said, oh, they're different. We're just going to beat on them.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened instead was that I was just kind of on the periphery, watching everybody and finding out later that some of that was this highly sensitive thing where I was just really able to look at people and know exactly who they were.
Mm-hmm.
And later I've thought to myself, well, that thing that happened where I was kind of on the periphery was actually, for me, a protection.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't put myself out there too much because I was afraid of, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? Just not being understood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But when I got to high school, I remember having periods where I just was so low, and even the things that I loved were things that couldn't lift my spirits. And it would go in waves, which now I look at and realize, the depression was the depressive part of bipolar. And then I had this mania stuff, which it's interesting because Carolyn and I were just talking about this in the car earlier, where the work that I did, I was in the professional theater, and that all started in high school. And I would get into periods that in the theater we call tech week, which you're putting all the technical aspects of the show into what's been rehearsed by the actors. And then you have a preview period where shows are being offered for free or for half price so that people can come and kind of give feedback. But for those of us on the tech side, I was on the tech side, I was a production manager. It was like I would get there at 8 o'clock in the morning. I would not sometimes leave until 2 a.m. Obviously, if you do that for a number of days, you would ordinarily just like become a little mess. But what would happen with me is I would kick into mania.
Mm-hmm.
And that could keep me going for days, like on this only 4 hours of sleep a night sort of thing, and all the way into previews, because you're still working on stuff with the show. You're still taking care of notes that you've gotten from the director and the other designers and this and that. And then the show would open and I would go home and like sleep for 48 hours because my body had finally let go. And it was only years later when I had this wonderful psychiatrist in Washington that she pointed out to me that bipolar is in a high percentage with artistic people, with people who do art and theater and dance and all forms of creative work, because there is a fluctuation between I can't get this to work right, it's really driving me crazy, I'm depressed, and mania, which is, oh my God, everything is so great, and we're working hard and we're making it all happen. And as soon as she told me that, I was like, oh yes, I saw that all the time. So my progression was, stumbling through these two sides of my personality, not really getting either one of them, and going into my adulthood trying to control that as much as I could. And anybody who has bipolar disorder will tell you that's a huge task. Like trying to make everything integrate in a way that gives you the opportunity to work kind of distraction free. I also have ADD. So yeah, that's pretty much how it started.
Well, what point, like, when did you get diagnosed? Was that in Washington? That was in Washington, right?
Right.
With that amazing doctor that you
I
had?
had an amazing psychiatrist. I miss her
So
a lot.
you were with her for years.
I was.
Yeah.
I was with her for 11 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and she
So
helped
yeah,
me
she
so
saw a
much.
lot of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what happened was, I'd managed to figure out ways to make my career work, like becoming really, really organized so that I wasn't always like scattered looking for things, working on things. Um, and then near the end of my career here in Chicago, I began to have really bad symptoms of fatigue and like pain in my chest, and ultimately that led to a diagnosis of breast cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And I was quite sick, and so they threw the kitchen sink at me um, in a very aggressive way. And when that was all over, all the treatment, um, which Caroline remembers my date of finishing every year. She
Yep.
calls
12,
me on the
12,
phone.
12. December 12th, 2012.
Um, and it was in the spring after that I went for a follow-up appointment with my oncologist. And while I was meeting with the nurse, I started to just cry. I just like started crying, and I couldn't stop crying. And they sent for the woman who was the patient navigator, and she was talking to me about like, let's figure out what you need. And obviously you're very upset, and this goes deeper than just, like you couldn't find a parking spot sort of stuff. And at the time, they had lost their psychiatrist who was on staff at the hospital. And so she went and asked some people, and she's like, here is this name and number. She's supposed to be the best. Give her a call. And she'd closed her practice. And I was like, ugh, you know. And she had me tell her a little bit about what's going on. She talked to the people at the hospital. She came back to me and said, yes, I will take you as a patient because you need me. And I did. And that was when it was like the first two appointments I had with her. I had been told a number of years before that I had epilepsy. And she said, I don't think you have epilepsy. I think you have bipolar disorder. And that was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like I didn't hear that coming. And then we just worked on it, and the integration with the highly sensitive, like everything affects me strongly, including my health, my relationships, my this and that. And she helped me find the ways to control the impulses, as well as getting me on a really great medication regimen, which I can only stress enough. If you have something like this going on and you feel like, you're really not getting the help you need, go find yourself a really good psychiatrist and have them help you, because it made all the difference in the world for me. I had been struggling for years, and all of a sudden I had support in a way I'd never had before, and it changed my life. And she was awesome. And we just kept working through what it is to be bipolar, how to deal with especially episodes of depression, because I had the depressive type. And I learned things like, when I would get to the point where I couldn't think anything good about myself, I needed to increase my medication. But that took a while, like feeling the way and working with her. And she gave me the freedom of like, with a couple of my medications, like, this is your maintenance level. And if you need to, you can go up like 2 pills. Um, and that changed my life too, because now when I feel that kind of negativeness about myself coming on, I have something I can do about it, which will turn it around. And it does.
Mm-hmm. You know, you've come such a long way, and your recovery journey, not just from your mental illness, but from your physical illnesses and your cancer, because believe me, she's been through a lot. Like, how many surgeries?
17.
17. Believe me, she's had the gauntlet. But your recovery has just been so beautiful. Like, I've seen you go from being bedridden to hiking with me to horseback riding, and your mind strengthening and you becoming stable. And I would just really love it if you would share the story with everyone about your church and the Spin Cafe and how you advocated for people.
So at the time that all this was happening, where I was getting the good information and the good help, I was attending a small Episcopal church in Oak Harbor where I lived. And I loved this little church. It was small, but really full of people who were engaged with each other and engaged with helping at the church. Like, I've been a member of several churches over the years, and there was nothing to like compare to this church. Everybody in the church did something, and that's something I'd not seen before. You know, always at other churches there'd be the core group of people who did everything, and then other people that just came and went and came and went and didn't volunteer. That was not how this church was. It was really wonderful. Anyway, we got to the point where we were in the pandemic, and several people at the church knew I had a history in technical theater, and they approached me and said, you know, could you set up a streaming thing for us? And I said, sure, I'd be happy to do that. And that ended up taking quite a while because I was wading into something that was actually, on the surface, looked easy, but in reality, like getting the right equipment, setting everything up, blah, 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 took a while. So I was at the church a lot, like more than usual. I was there most days working on this. And not long before that, a group had come in to use our community space called Spin Cafe. And this was for people who were addicts or homeless or disadvantaged in the community. And when they started being there all the time, it was really interesting because due to my experiences with Carolyn, who was still moving through her journey, I felt a lot of compassion and care for these people. And some of them were, I had to assume, undiagnosed, untreated people with mental health issues. One of the interesting things for me was having seen Carolyn go through psychosis. I could now recognize it in other people, and actually was able, I became a member of a committee that was designed to interface between the church and the Spin Cafe. And I found that so rewarding because I was there frequently. I would go in and talk to people. Sometimes they'd come into the nave and talk to me. And it was like this community that I actually felt very comfortable being a part of. And I actually got close to one woman who was quite obviously psychotic. And didn't usually want to spend time with most people. But one day she was trying to get the zipper on her backpack to zip, and it just wouldn't. And I came over and said, "Can I help you with this? I think I could do this." And that started a relationship with her where I could talk to her sometimes when other people couldn't. And that was because of my history, because of Carolyn's history. And it made me feel so good. And then we went through a period where the people in the church who didn't understand this, who didn't understand why some of the people were behaving the way they were, wanted to cut the group from having our church as a base. But it was like, well, where are they supposed to go? Because they don't have a place right now. So then we had a big community meeting in the church, and everybody got to speak. And there was a group of us that were very supportive. There was a group that wasn't supportive. But I like to think that the share that I did, which included conversation about Carolyn, not in a telling everybody all about it, but just like touching on it and talking a little bit about her experience and saying, you know, some of these people need help, and Spin's working on getting them help. Like, I'm in the Nave a lot working on the streaming thing, and there's a couple of social workers that come in and bring people from the community room and sit and have sessions with them. So it's not like nothing is happening. You know, stuff is happening, and these people deserve a place to be, because mostly people in the community don't want them. So anyway, it worked out. We kept them.
And you were so strong. And I love that you have such a like strong voice for this community, for yourself, for me, for the Spin Cafe. Oh, it means so much to me to have a family of advocates. And so, well, you have had such a remarkable journey. I love you. I'm so proud of you. I would just like to wrap up real quick with asking if you have any words of encouragement or inspiration for anyone who may be at the beginning of their mental health journey, who may be struggling.
I think the most important thing I could say is trust yourself. You know best what it is that you're going through. And as hard as it will be, if things are really difficult for you, you have to try to advocate for yourself and make sure people hear you. I think that's the most important thing, because I've seen people, you know, through Carolyn and also in other places I've been, who are obviously struggling, but nobody knows what to do to help them. And that's when you have to try to bull through it and say, I need help. Somebody needs to help me get help. And if you're in the right environment, I guarantee somebody will listen.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much for that, Mom.
Welcome.
That was beautiful. I love you so much. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Yes.
Thank you so much for returning to my channel. If anyone would like to see the first interview that I did with my mom, I will link it in the description below. And we'll probably be seeing more of you along the way.
Oh, lovely.
That would be great. And also, just to kind of close, thank you so much for watching this video. We truly appreciate it. I really appreciate all the support that I've gotten in growing this channel. If you'd like to further support my channel, you can like, comment, or subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you thought of today's discussion or any ideas you have for future videos, because I love to take suggestions. You can also further support me on Patreon or by buying my merch. There will also be links in the description. And then if you buy a cool t-shirt, you can rock it around promoting Psychotic in Seattle. There will be more fun content coming soon, so stick around. I put out videos every Thursday/Friday, and there will be more coming soon. Thank you all. Bye!